Welcome, good evening, good night, cultist of the Shining Icosideron Great Order. This is the First Acolyte Fovorobos, and we have a very special guest today. I am very excited about this one. In general, it's been very exciting to meet all these people, but we have, let me see if I say it correctly, Sean Lowe. Perfect,
Hello.
Sean. Hi,
Yeah.
welcome. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm great.
I'm saying that this is very exciting because uh, this is our very first guest that is born in Asia, because we've had a few guests that live currently there, but you're the first one. And this is very exciting because it's always nice to see the different perspectives of people, and where you're born affects a lot your view on the world, right? So I'm very interested in talking to you about general RPGs in your country, on your regions, and also specifically about education. But first of all, how are you doing? What time is it for you?
Right now it's 9 exactly,
Oh
9
wow.
a.m.
Wow, that's a huge difference. Well, thank you for accepting the interview this early in the morning. I don't know if you have a lot of things during the morning, but thank you so much for accepting.
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now, I know from where you're from, but can you tell the other viewers where are you from?
All right, so I'm from Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Born, lived here most for uh, all of my life. But I am very interested in history, in geography as well. I really enjoy reading a lot about the world. I enjoy fiction as well. So I do try to stay in touch with. I've got people that I met, online from other countries as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I was actually really happy, that you guys got in touch with me because I think it's the first time as well that I've been invited on a Twitch stream. So that's pretty exciting.
Wow, that's very nice. Well, this is very exciting then for both of us. So I know that we are here to talk about tabletop RPGs and education. However, I am very curious, and I hope you can give us a few minutes about this before we get into the actual matter of their interview. But could you tell us how is the scene, the RPG scene there?
I think it's been pretty exciting in the last few years, especially.
Mhm.
Dungeons and Dragons, of course, is the main game that's being played by most of the people in the scene.
Yeah, makes sense.
But we do have other games that are going on as well. Blades in the Dark, more narrative-based games, they are picking up as well. In fact, when I was when I first started Swords and Stationery, we had an open house. So we actually did a Blades in the Dark multi-table campaign. Not
Wow.
campaign, one shot, but it was yeah. So the outcome of what each table did affected the other table. So that was kind of experimental, but it was a cool little experiment that we did. And surprisingly, most of the players who would join, they were familiar with the system as well, so it's not just D&D, or even some of the other common systems like Pathfinder, but um, the more narrative systems, they do get quite a bit of attention here as well. So pretty exciting. Same with the other types of games like board games as well. We've got quite a few board game communities in Singapore too, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is. It's I find it curious because, well, yes, Dungeons and Dragons is always the most known game, even for people that don't really play. However, so far, the second answer behind Dungeons and Dragons is vampire. In pretty much all my interviews, and also the ones in Spanish, vampire is pretty much always the second one. It's very interesting. Do you know of any uh games created there from your country or in the region?
There have been a couple of games, to my
Mhm.
knowledge, one of which was created by a friend of mine, Shahan. So, uh, well, Shahan was actually one of the people that inspired me to start Swords and Stationery.
Mhm.
So he's quite into Asian culture, and he actually did a master's thesis on Dungeons and Dragons and learning. So that was what inspired me. So if I'm not mistaken, he's actually created a couple of role-playing games
Mhm.
that are related to different cultures. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, that is pretty cool. I would like to know more about those, but we can have those interviews later on. Um, wait, I was going to change the subject, but we have a question in the chat. What games do you prefer?
I like to have my games a little bit more crunchy, but with narrative styles, with a narrative focus as well. So the current game that I'm playing quite extensively with my students is Savage Worlds. Um,
Hmm?
yeah, it's I mean for as it's a pretty good alternative to say freeform, universe thematically universal games,
Hmm.
and I enjoy it quite a bit because it's got a good emphasis on storytelling, right? So the story moves fairly quickly. That tagline is basically fast, furious, fun. So things move along at a very good pace. And during combats as well, they tends to be pretty um, dependent on your character's stats as well. So that's something that we enjoy as well. And in fact, I find that when I play with the kids, for example, they, I love it when they step out their characters and they build their characters in ways that reflect themselves, right?
Yeah,
So that the narrative changes depending on the actions, But more importantly, during combat, you can see the kind of you can see that when they build their characters in ways that they want to play it, it's it shows in the kind of moves, the kind of powers that they have, right? And even until now, we have running jokes about their characters, the way their characters, the stuff that their characters did in combat and during and out of combat. Um, so yeah, for me, I mean, I'm not paid to advertise for Savage Worlds, but for me, it's the game that really hits all the right notes. Um, I, I I did try getting into GURPS as well,
hmm,
and Traveler, both of which I quite enjoyed as well. But yeah, for me, Savage Worlds hits all the right notes. Dungeons and Dragons, to be honest, I enjoyed the earlier editions, not so much the fifth edition.
we agree.
I mean, yeah, it's not for me. I just felt it was a little bit too. Um, there were too many parts to it. Uh, yeah, but I
Yeah.
do have a lot of friends who enjoy it, so it's fine. I mean, I think there are different RPGs for different people, but for me, yeah, it would be something that is right in the middle.
So both battle and throwing dices and
That's,
narrative.
that's right. I did get into Vampire the Masquerade for a while as well. Ran a couple of sessions, and that was cool, but I felt that um it was maybe a little bit too dependent on there was a bit too much to keep track of, because my kids have dyslexia, right?
Right.
So I've never tried it with my kids. I've tried it with other players, so I never actually attempted to try it with my students, but yeah, it was a little bit too heavy on the powers and the skills.
Yeah, yeah, that is true. Even the character sheet, you have to deal with a lot of things.
Yeah,
So,
but thematically, I love it. I think it's great.
yeah, I agree. I agree with that. We actually have a game that is with a similar thematic in case you want to play at some point.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
You mentioned three times already your kids, so I have to jump into that subject right away. We are here to talk about tabletop RPGs in education, and before we can talk about others' education, can you tell us a little bit about your education, like your background?
So I didn't plan to get into education. I did my degree in economics locally, um,
Oh,
but my interest was actually in English and yeah, it was basically in English and languages in general,
mhm.
because I love languages. I love language and I love cultures. I think it's the arts, humanities has always been more my thing. So I did economics as a backup, just in case things didn't work out and I could, go to the finance industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, but how I ended up in education was really by chance. I was looking for a job after I quit
Mhm.
my previous job, and just so happened that uh, my mom and I were looking for jobs, right? So she found this job on the papers. The Dyslexia Association was hiring, so um, I thought, cool. I am I have passing familiarity with dyslexia, so I decided to have a look at their website, see what
Okay.
other kind of job openings they had.
Mhm.
So turns out they were actually looking for educational therapists, or rather trainee therapists. So they would actually provide the training and the certification in their academy. So
Wow.
I decided, yeah, I thought it was a good idea to sign on with them, and so got my specialist diploma in specific learning difficulties. That was in 2013 December. Yeah, and then yeah, I never looked back after that, because to me it was very rewarding. It was engaging. I loved interacting with the kids. You know.
That is good. It is really different from what you studied, but I mean, if it was a great opportunity that you found. Now, before we you can explain to us what do you do and how you combine tabletop RPGs, could you explain to me and the audience exactly what it means to talk about dyslexia?
I think dyslexia is there's been more awareness towards dyslexia in recent years.
Mhm.
And how most people here in Singapore, at least, would understand it is that um, the dyslexic person would have difficulty with reading and spelling, right? So the common symptoms that we know would be that the the letters might be reversed. Um, they might have trouble remembering how to spell even basic words, right?
Okay.
Um, but it goes beyond that, because what I tell um, my students' parents, um, and based on my own observations as well, is that dyslexic students, many of them, if given the right help, they can actually go very far because they have different ways of seeing things, right? Many dyslexic students tend to be more visual learners.
Okay.
So it's how the strengths are being built. And in fact, a common misconception is that dyslexics are weaker in language,
Mhm.
but that's not true, right? There have been quite a number of dyslexic authors who are very prominent. Octavia Butler. Um, there was I, there was speculation that the author of Pride and Prejudice, what's her name again? Uh,
Oh, right.
Google.
Let's go to Google.
Yeah, Jane Austen. There was some speculation as well that she might be dyslexic,
I didn't know that.
um, based on a manuscript that she sent to the publisher. I think they found quite a number of errors. So I mean, it was never confirmed, right? But um, dyslexic students, when they get the right help and they fix or overcome the basic spelling and reading issues that they have,
Mhm.
that's when they can actually put their creativity out there. Yeah, and it's in the sense, I guess, while there is more awareness of dyslexia, there is still no consensus, or rather, um, there still is quite a bit of misconception about what dyslexics can and cannot do. You know, at the end of the day, I would say that uh, because most of my students, they are of the older age group, and my oldest ex-student right now, she's 26.
Okay.
So quite a few of them still keep in touch with me, because we tend to chat quite a bit as well, and we tend to bond, and um, they a lot of times I have to be their counselor as well, to listen to their problems, right? So what I've seen of my older students is that many of them go on to be to just be like everyone else, like um you wouldn't be able to tell that they have dyslexia.
Yeah, I mean, like in yeah, I'm sorry, I understand. And I have a question. This is mostly for my curiosity. I know that it's not exactly related to tabletop or the subject of the interview, but so is dyslexia something that can be, like, with practice can be eliminated, or it's just a matter of getting used to it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it's something that usually that my potential clients know as well. Um, I Okay, well, in my practice, I've never actually seen it 100% overcome.
Okay.
Maybe the best we can reach is 99%. When I say 99%, that means that when they are writing, let's say, an academic essay, they will still make a couple of mistakes in there, like spelling mistakes, might be punctuation mistakes, right? A missing full stop. Um, But the fact that we can hit maybe 99% accuracy.
That's
And in
amazing.
fact, even for people, yeah, it's amazing, right? Even for people without dyslexia, we still make mistakes, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think it's a very good standard to hit. And um I think that it does provide some sort of assurance to my clients as well, when the students' parents, when I tell them that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you are right. Even without that difficulty, we still make mistakes. So you cannot expect to be like 100% accurate all the time. So yeah, I agree. That's a very good number. So getting into the specifics of the interview, how did you decided to mix tabletop RPGs with education?
So when I was still working with my previous company,
Hmm.
um, I had quite a few students who they were very bright. You could see that they had great ideas, right? They were gamers, um, but um, that didn't translate to their interest in academics.
Okay.
And I mean, let's be honest. I think most people wouldn't actually enjoy um, doing homework, right? Doing
True.
schoolwork.
Yeah.
So for me, I when I was younger, I actually loved writing. I loved reading. I loved writing.
Hmm.
And one of the reasons was because I played quite a few. Well, my very first role playing game was on the PC actually. I think that
Okay.
was Ultima 6. Yeah, 6 or 7. And then I moved on to games like Diablo, Baldur's Gate, right? Planescape Torment, Fallout, the first one.
Yeah.
So that actually helped me a lot to build my interest in um, different genres like fantasy, sci-fi, um, and it got me interested in writing as well.
Hmm.
So when I was in school, I would love to write my own versions of fanfics of Diablo, let's say, and it actually I mean the 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 style that I got from these games, it helped me to build my own style as well.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, and I really wished, when I was younger, that I would actually have teachers that could teach me in the way that I enjoy, you know, because looking at my classmates, the others around me, right? Um, I could see some of my classmates, they didn't actually enjoy the writing process, But for me, I did because I always had that creative spark that I got from games. So when I looked at my students after I started working in the Dyslexia Association,
Yeah.
I thought to myself that would be cool, if I could do the same for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I couldn't play. I mean, I couldn't get them to play PC games in class, right? So I decided to try. I'm not sure if you have heard of a game called Dread, Dread. It's a horror game that uses Jenga blocks.
No, I haven't.
It's a really good game for one shots. So I would strongly recommend it. So how it works is you've got it basically emulates slasher movies, right? Horror movies.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had that group of older boys. They were
Mhm.
15 at the time.
Okay.
So I decided, since they were all gamers, right? Let's give this a shot, you know. And they love horror games as well. So trialed it in class. We did scenario where they were supposed to rescue a group of children from an abandoned hospital that was supposedly haunted.
Okay.
Yeah, and they enjoyed it. The experience was so novel to them because at the time when I trialed it with them, that was in 2014. They had
Okay.
never played anything like it before, and fifth edition was still known as D&D Next at the time, so it was still being play tested. It wasn't that big of a resurgence yet. So they liked the game and they asked for more. So I decided, let's try it out. Let's do more games, but let's tie in writing activities with these games as well. And you could see that the interest increased by a lot. It wasn't just, okay, well, I've got to do work. Let's do the work right now. It became, okay, cool. We're doing writing. We're writing based on the game. I remember this scene where Caesar's man was chasing me. So let's write. That scene. It's cool. We're gonna make it action packed. Yeah. So that was when I realized that there was a lot of potential to be had in tabletop games, right? Tying it in with academic work. And after I trialed it with that class, I decided to play fantasy games
Okay.
with some of my other classes as well. And in fact, I tried other games. So the next game that I did was actually this fantasy game called Bare Bones Fantasy. It was based off this old TSR game called Star Frontiers, I think. It's a percentile game. So it was a very simple game whereby instead of having skills, the skills were the classes. So
Okay.
you had so your different skills were basically enchanter, spellcaster, academic, cleric, thief, and warrior, if I remember correctly. So you could put points into those skills, and it's a very multi-class kind of game. So you could be putting points into warrior and spellcaster to have a spell sword kind of game. So I tried that with some of my other classes, especially the
Mm-hmm.
younger ones, and
Yeah.
to my surprise, even the younger ones, like the 10-year-olds, they enjoyed it as well, and they were able to follow through. So that was when I decided I've got to make something out of this, otherwise it would be a waste, not to put this into motion,
Yes, of
to
course.
start something regular. Yeah.
All right. So far, all of your students are introduced to tabletop RPGs by you, or do you have any
Yeah.
students that say, "Oh yeah, I know that game" or something like that?
I think with the explosion of fifth ed in 2017,
Mm-hmm.
there have been more students who have kind of heard of it, but they've never actually played it before.
Okay. So you are, besides helping people with their process, you are introducing people to the world of tabletop RPGs. I really like what you're doing there.
Thanks.
So exactly how do you use the games? Because, for example, I spoke with someone a few weeks ago about this, and this person, what he does is they play a little, the kids are stimulated, and then they pay more attention. And I've also, for example, the last interview, what he does is he puts a game so they can learn the subjects of whatever they're learning. And it's easy for me to imagine learning, I don't know, biology through a game. However, what you do is different. You do therapy. How do you mix those?
So, educational therapy is a little bit closer to academic tuition, whereby because we need to target the students' weaknesses,
Mm-hmm.
so it makes it easier for us in the sense that if let's say student A is weak in say writing,
Okay.
and if let's say that weakness involves her ability to spell words, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I've actually done for such a student um, was that I'm not sure if you've heard of oh shoot, suddenly the name escapes me. Hero. I keep thinking Hero Clicks, but Hero Clicks is the miniatures. There was recently they did a relaunch of it. Hasbro did it. Heroescape, Hero something. I can't remember. So, oh my gosh.
I'm not sure.
But it was basically a board game that uh, tied in RPG mechanics as well. Um, and how it works, I mean, how what I adapted was I took the map idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I have quite a number of maps that I bought online, printed them out, and then created a random dungeon. So as students go through the dungeon, they have to, in order to attack a monster, they have to read a word, and in order to cast a
Okay.
spell, they literally have to spell a word.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, and there's a story behind it as well. So um, if if you're familiar with Diablo, so basically it has that similar concept as well. The deeper you go, the harder the words get. Because basically the monsters get harder.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hero Quest, right? That's the name of the game, Hero Quest. So I
Okay,
didn't
yeah,
remember
I
it.
think I've heard of that game, yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a there's a comment in the chat saying that this is a great idea, and I agree, it's a great idea. It gets harder as the level gets higher, the word gets harder, or the writing or the spelling. It's a great idea. So I'm understanding that you do then individual therapy, like
No.
with one
We try
student
to
at a
have
time.
group classes as far as possible.
Oh,
Because with one-to-one, I think with one-to-one, there are a lot of things that we can't actually do in class, right?
yeah.
You don't have that same social interaction that kids have with one another. I do have my teaching assistant sometimes coming in to facilitate, so he will sit in as a player,
Okay.
but yeah, it's just different, the way he interacts with the kids versus how the kids interact with one another.
All right. And then so I think you mentioned that you started working uh with dyslexia and this therapies around 2013, you said?
Yeah, 2013.
Since when did you use tabletop RPGs for the therapies?
So 2014 was when we tried it out. 2015 was when I started making it more of a regular thing.
Wow. So you've been doing that for almost 10 years.
Yeah, now that you mention it.
I haven't thought about it. All right, that's a lot of time. How do you see or do you feel any difference from where you started to what you're doing now? Have you added more things or changed it? How has been that process?
Yeah, for sure, it's evolved the way uh, we have done certain processes.
Mhm.
For one, the RPG sessions are definitely a lot more regular. We used to do it once every 6 months back in my previous company. And I realized that once every 6 months, there was no way we could get a campaign done. So now we've actually um, increased the frequency to once a month, and it gives the kids more motivation as well, because they'll always be looking forward to the next session.
Yeah.
The other thing is that we have, I have stuck very firmly to one single setting, which is a setting that we borrowed from Bare Bones Fantasy.
Mhm.
So basically, whatever happens in that setting for one campaign, it actually affects the other students' campaigns as well.
Okay.
So in that sense, it becomes a shared setting whereby the actions of one individual might potentially affect what happens in other classes.
All right.
Yeah.
That's great. So are you the only, should I say teacher? Or what would be the best description? Teacher?
Yeah, I suppose teacher or therapist.
Okay. Are you the only one that uses games, or have you been able to have others implement it? Because
I
I
think as
understand you
far
work
as,
with other teachers, right?
yeah, I do.
Okay.
Mm, I know of other therapists and psychologists who have started similar programs. Some of them are good friends of mine. I know of a few school teachers who actually use it, who actually run games for their students, and they're very good people because we sometimes would meet up and chat. Um, in fact, one of the teachers that I know of, she actually got introduced to D&D
Mhm.
after one of the students introduced it to her, and that student that introduced it to her was actually the sister of one of my ex students. So that my ex student, he used to come in to for lessons, right? And we used to have a few RPG sessions. So his sister was very curious about it because she's heard of Dungeons and Dragons. So
Yeah.
she read up more about it, and then that's when she started. She got into the game, and she wanted to play it with her friends, right? So she didn't. I don't think she really wanted to be a long-term dungeon master. So
Mhm.
she got her teacher into the game as well, and then that's how teacher became their DM.
Yeah. All right. That's amazing. Um, and you mentioned that you started working in an association, right? Did you
Come
face
again?
any? I'm sorry.
Sorry. You were saying
Oh,
that
you started working with this. You mentioned association.
yeah, the Dyslexia Association.
Did you face any like resistance? Anyone saying no, this doesn't work, or something like that?
Yeah, that's why I left.
Oh, okay. Oh, and that's the origin of Swords and Stationery, maybe?
Yeah.
All right. So what is Swords and Stationery?
Um, why Swords and Stationery?
Yeah. What is it? Why do you have that name? Why did you, well, because you left, but why did you start it?
So I was always very intrigued by the fantasy genre,
Mm-hmm.
and one of my favorite authors was actually Robert Howard. He wrote Conan the
Mm-hmm.
Barbarian, Solomon Kane. So it was he and a few other authors during that era, the 1910s to the 1930s, that pioneered the sword and sorcery genre, which was later, the term was actually coined by the author who wrote Grey Mouser and Faffer. Can't remember his name suddenly. Fritz Leiber. So I thought, having a name that was less aligned with therapy, because most therapy centers they would have um very therapeutic names,
Mm-hmm.
right? but I wanted something different. So I was thinking, what about something closer to sword and sorcery or sword and
Okay.
sandals? Yeah. And I was thinking, well, I can keep the sword, but I can't put the sorcery in there. I'm gonna have to change up the sorcery because it might be seen as something that's not very appropriate, right? So what about stationery? And then to me at the time, the name didn't have that ring to it. But I thought to myself, because well, the pen is mightier than the sword, right?
That's
So
true.
yeah, I decided, well, let's go with swords and stationery, and then see how it goes. So I first started it as a blog. I would do posts on education and dyslexia and games
Mm-hmm.
as well. And then from there, I decided, you know what, if I'm going to be starting my own business, I might as well just go full on with swords and stationery. So I just
Wow.
took the name
Okay.
and just, yeah. But of course, I do get regular questions like, oh, what kind of stationery do you sell? So I got to explain, no, we don't sell stationery. We help kids with dyslexia.
All right. Yeah. Actually, that was something that I thought the first time I read the name, because I was looking for people that do tabletop RPGs and education, and one of the first thing that popped up on the internet was your page and your content, and I was like immediately intrigued because I thought, why something related to stationery is popping up with the tag tabletop RPG. So I clicked it. I think it was the second thing that I clicked when I was doing my research. And then I found what you do in your article. Um, I'm not sure. Yeah, I think you wrote it. The how to use role playing games to educate children. The name is something like that. And I
Yeah.
was very excited. I thought I have to contact this person. So when did you start Source and Stationery?
It was created as a blog back in 2016, I think. But I left the company in 2017.
Okay.
Um, that was a rough time. So basically, we hadn't gotten a regular place yet.
Mhm.
Mm, The center, but yeah, the name was incorporated back in 2017. The center was only our current place, or rather, our permanent location was only uh rented. Like we got it only in 2018. That was when we had our opening.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's been a few years then. That's amazing. And you are still
Of
running.
yeah. I'm
I
glad.
mean,
I'm glad to still be running. It was rough during the initial years.
of course. Yeah, I mean, I could imagine. You would say we. So there is a team with you.
No, well, kind of, but when I say we, usually it's just talking about myself and the company because
Okay.
I don't know. I just feel like it sounds nicer. It's got a better ring to it.
It is true. It sounds nicer when you say like that. But I mean, I think you should be proud to be doing it yourself and growing it. Thinking that you didn't actually like study for this and you found it more like a coincidence than like a path you originally planned, and then you found it and you, I imagine, fell in love with this process and are still here after 10 years. I think it's amazing and you should be very proud of it.
Thank you. It means a lot to me when I get feedback like that. I think it makes it um I feel that um a lot of what I do, um the students appreciate it, but when I hear compliments like that, I think it really, really makes my day, because
Mhm.
I just feel that there can be so much more done for education.
It's true. It's true. I agree. And tabletop RPGs are very useful. They're stimulating and you can do things that otherwise you couldn't do. It's amazing. We have 3 questions in the chat. Let me go back to the first one. All right, so I'll ask this one first. I guess it's faster, and I hope it's not a problem. But how old are you?
I'm 35 this year. Actually, I just turned 35 a week ago.
Congratulations.
I feel old.
You are not. Don't say that. Most of the viewers have this around the same age. All right. The other question, actually, this was sent a while ago. Sorry to Sombra. Her question is, do you do homebrew for D&D to make it easier to understand for your kids?
There was once when I actually used D&D, there was a it's well, I guess you can call it homebrew, but it's not my homebrew. It's called Dagger for Kids. So what it does is it basically uses first edition, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
And it strips most of the rules. So you wouldn't, I mean, any, you know, rules like for certain spells, right? They have been made simpler as well. So that was the one time that I actually used a D&D based system, and it was fun. And I would actually recommend modifying the actual rules if you're running it for younger kids.
Mhm.
Uh, because even at level one, there can be quite a number of things to take note of, right? So
Yes.
instead of having that many classes, you might want to just streamline it down to say fighter, uh, and maybe one of the other magic classes, and maybe one of the rogue classes
Right. Yeah.
like thief. Yeah,
Yeah. Like punches, spells, and uh, I don't know, daggers.
yeah. You can even rename it and just keep it simple. Um, in fact, you can just, I suppose, with fifth edition, you can just do without the skills, and just apply attribute modifiers to it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. But well, I mean, this question would be assuming that you play D&D, but you said that you don't usually use D&D for your sessions, right?
Yeah, I don't. With the younger kids, I actually use Hero Kids. I think it's a great game. Um, it's very simple to run,
Mhm.
and it it's got quite a number of adventures there. So there's not much to homebrew for the game.
Okay. All right. Let me see. We have the next question is, do you have help from other teachers?
I work quite closely with an external consultant, so that's where we develop our materials.
Mhm.
I have a teaching assistant as well. Well, actually two, but because they're both working full time, so it's quite difficult to get them in right now. Apart from that, I do share tips with my teacher friends,
Mhm.
and vice versa.
Mhm.
So that's how we try to keep our curriculum involved in with the mainstream syllabus as well.
Okay, yeah. And let me see. We had a third question here. During the pandemic, did you still give therapy sessions? How did that affect what you do?
Yeah, we still did. We had a lockdown here for how long was it? I think it was a month or 2 months. So during that time,
Mhm.
I did all of the sessions online on Discord. And there were, when we had to do our RPGs with the older students,
Mhm.
what I would do is we'll use Roll20. Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
that was fine. Um, barring the occasional technical glitch that the students experienced. And when I say technical glitch, I'm actually referring to things like forgetting their passwords. So that was a bit of a headache.
Yeah.
Um, with the younger ones, we did it on Discord. So what I would do is I would actually show them images, right, and the map, for example, and there would be very little need for them to log into other accounts because with the younger ones, I didn't want it to be I didn't want to have to troubleshoot the issues for most of the sessions. So we would just, I'll just keep it simple.
Mhm.
No?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. We have a recommendation here if you would like to consider it. The High Priestess is mentioning that you should try an Ampersand Studio system for this at some point.
Sure.
And yes, actually, I did mention that to him when we were before we started the interview. We were talking a little bit, and he was asking, "What do you guys do?" I gave him a small introduction to Ampersand Studio, and I did invite him. So we have that pending. So I'm curious, since you started working with this and you decided to make this a path, like not only like, oh, it's my job, but truly dedicate yourself to this. Did you decided to like make additional studies or something like that?
I have considered writing a research paper. Spoke about it with some of my psychologist friends. The problem is writing a paper takes a lot of time.
Yes.
I do have the data on hand, the progress that students have made, and I can quantify it. It's just that, do I have the time to sit down and write it? That's a different story. I do plan to get it published eventually, but I'll just have to free up time on my hands first, probably when the business grows.
Wow. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. Running the business plus doing the therapy plus writing a paper, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that as fellow game masters, you will know the amount of crap that goes into a session.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. So I have a question, and I'm not sure how comfortable you would feel with like going over this or more detail. But why do you think, if you consider that, why do you think doing or adding the games to the sessions to education, and in your case to educational therapy, why do you think it helps, or yeah, why do you think it helps?
Having games, well, role-playing games especially, when you think about it, there is so much about it that is tied to learning.
Mhm.
Um, I could be doing vocabulary, right? And let's say if I want the vocabulary to be targeting uh, movement verbs, right? I want to
Okay.
teach words that are related to movements. I could do it during the role-playing games by actually using the words when I'm describing them. And in role-playing games, players see their characters in both first person and third person. So that provides a level of visualization that is very different than what other forms of media can provide. So if I want to tie, let's say, the vocabulary to the game itself, that would be possible, you
Mhm.
know, um,
Yeah.
as compared to, let's say, a movie, right? Because in the movie, they can see it on screen, but they would not be able to immediately link up to see that, oh, this is the word that's being used until, somebody pauses the movie and tells them about it, right?
Yeah.
And similarly, in role-playing games, it's not just vocabulary. If I want to tie it in with, let's say, reading comprehension, right, to train their reading, the level of motivation that they would have to start reading on their own is already there. Because I try to tie the passages, the text, to what happens in the games, right?
Right.
Or it may not even be directly related to the game itself, but indirectly related. So there was one session that we had. This was a post-apocalyptic game where there was an election going on. So from that game, right? Instead of just talking about the post-apocalyptic setting, what I actually did was we had a reading comprehension passage that was talking about elections in the
Mhm.
real world, and how the electoral process works in let's say Singapore.
Mhm.
So through that, the students not only developed an intrinsic understanding of it already, but they get the interest as well. So when they are reading the passage, a lot of ideas just click with them. because they've been through it in the game.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah,
can
that
see
is
it.
true.
It's not just, yeah, it's not just in their answers that you can see that they actually understand, but
Mm-hmm.
it's in their actions as well, their behavior. You know, you can, instead of just, as I mentioned earlier, instead of just going through the motions, you know, and just acknowledging that there's work, they would actually be asking questions. You know, they would actually be reading through on their own and pointing certain things out, like, oh, this was just like in the game.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to unpack, and I think the reason why role-playing games work is because it's such a complex process. You know, it's a game, yeah, but there's a lot to it, and it really depends on how you game master as well. So, for example, when I game master, I
Mm-hmm.
show a lot of images on screen, and then we have a TV on the table as well to show the maps. So it becomes very visual as well. And when you unpack all of it, right, there is so much that you can get from it. But I think the question that was asked was also a very good one, because it's it depends on how an educator would use it,
Yeah, that's true.
right? Right. So some a couple of psychologist friends of mine, they are doing they are, I believe it's a stripped down version of fifth ed,
Mm-hmm.
and they're doing it to build social skills, right? So because of
Right.
their background in psychology, they are able to understand what the objective is and how to tweak the game to fit that objective.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this was a piece of advice that I gave to a friend as well who wants to start a similar kind of business in art therapy,
Mm-hmm.
which is that when you go into educating, or any form of interaction with an objective, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have
Yeah.
to be very clear of what the learning objective is. Is it to build
True.
social skills? Is it to build language skills? Right? And if you have that in mind, then it becomes much clearer how you can tie the game into the learning.
Right. That's true. Now that you're mentioning language, I do have a question. Do you do the therapy and everything in Malay? I think that's the official language, right?
Malay is the official language of our anthem.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I would say that English probably is the first language that everybody speaks. I mean, it's the most common language that's spoken here. Um,
Wow.
my mother tongue is actually Mandarin, but I can speak a little bit of Malay as well. Uh,
Hey.
so I did incorporate other languages into my RPGs as well. I actually incorporated some Japanese into our one of our fantasy campaigns, but just
Wow.
for one of the sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, but that's very interesting because you're not only facing the actual problem, that why they're going to the therapy, the dyslexia, but you're also adding and improving their understanding of other languages, even if it's just English and something else like for a session. That's amazing. It's a lot of help that will prepare people for other things besides the dyslexia.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Wow, that's amazing. I am amazed. As a language learner and fan of learners, I am amazed with that.
I think languages are great. I would love to learn more languages during if I could during my spare time. Um, in fact, I've always been joking with my wife because I learned a bit of Vietnamese when I was in university.
Mhm.
So I've forgotten most of it, you know, but I would love to learn it again. I mean, like to pick up where I left off, so that when we go to Vietnam next time for traveling, we
Mhm.
could I'll be able to say more than just hello, because right now that's the only thing I know how to say in Vietnamese: hello and thank you.
I mean, very useful when you're traveling, but it's easier if you know all the things.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I am really impressed with all the things that you've been saying, especially the difference in the culture and how everything is combined and how you add all those elements to the sessions. I do have, I'm sorry, I think we have a question on the chat. But while I find it, I did have a question that is not exactly related to like specifically source and stationery. It's more about the language. But oh yeah, you know what? My question was if it was easy to find books and tabletop RPGs content, but since you speak English, most of the country speaks English, I guess it's easy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it is amazing. Again, I know that I already said it, and actually, I want to mention it again because a lot of people in the chat have mentioned it that it is amazing what you do and the effort that you're putting into adding things and elements to something that is, at least in my perspective here in Mexico and in Latin America, it's not very common to find people really passionate about this kind of therapy. Like it's not that common. You do find a couple of organizations, but most of the times people with this kind of issues are kind of abandoned. And finding someone that it's focused on that, like you, and is adding tabletop RPGs to that, for me personally, it's I am grateful for that. We are trying to make and here in the studio we try to show people that playing games is not only for fun, but also to learn and improve as a person in different aspects. And in that way, I feel like you are part of that team that we're trying to do.
Thank you. It makes me it means a lot to me.
Well, thank you so much for accepting and for talking to us about this, how you manage to combine all these things. I before we go to the some announcements that I have to make and other things, I would like to give you a few minutes to talk about anything that you would like to mention, either if it's from what we've talked so far, or for example, if you have, I don't know, an event or a show or presentation or anything that you would like to advertise. This time is for you.
Well, I really do hope that more people play games like that. I think it's a really good alternative to what we have, you know, from technology. It's I think it's a great hobby. You get to meet great people as well. I'm really glad. Like for example, being in this hobby has led me to you and your studio, right?
Mhm.
So it's been a pleasure as well, talking to you guys too. So I think it's a great hobby,
Likewise.
and I would urge everybody to get more games in. Make time for games. That Saturday night dinner. You can hold off. You can postpone it and play more games. That's great.
I completely agree. And yeah, it's true. It's something that we're trying to do, inviting people that create things or do things like what you do to try and impulse others. There was a comment in this chat actually, and also in the last week that last Sunday in the other interview, uh, saying please let's try to show this to other teachers and make sure that other teachers add this to the process of education because it's really what you said, right? I had that opportunity, or I wish I had that opportunity, so I am going to do it for others.
I hope
We
so
have
too.
another
This
question.
You are doing great work. Oh yes, go ahead.
Sorry, thank you so much. And we have another question in the chat. How can we support you? Do you have like a coffee or a patron or a way that we can support you?
No, I don't. uh, but that's very kind of you. Thank you.
Well, we can show his website and his, I don't know, Instagram or social media in general and try to show others what can be done, right?
That'd be very kind of you. Thank you.
Give me 1 second so we can, there you go. In a few minutes, you guys will see the link to his Instagram, and there you can find also the website. And that's how I found him. Uh All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you guys that have been on the chat. They are being very supportive. They say thank you for what you do. That is amazing. Great ideas. And I agree with them. Again, thank you for accepting the interview. We have here in the show a way to say thanks to our guests. People will be able to say it in a few seconds. It's an acknowledgement that we do, and that I will send it to you once I have it. Again, it's a symbolic way to say thank you and show the appreciation of the time you're giving us right now.
It's
And
an
a
honor.
lot of things on the chat as well. All right, real quick, I am going to switch to Spanish real quick. De nuevo, muchísimas gracias por todos los que están aquí, por los que se quedaron a la hora a la que hayan llegado. Espero que les haya gustado, que haya sido interesante, entretenido. Para mí ha sido muy emocionante esta entrevista. Les recuerdo que la próxima semana la suma sacerdotisa y yo vamos a estar en la MXP, entonces no va a haber entrevistas. Sin embargo, pueden estar atentos a nuestras redes, vamos a estar posteando y vamos a estar compartiendo con ustedes todo el proceso. De todas maneras, pueden comunicarse con nosotros y estamos en contacto. Again, thank you so much for accepting. It has been very, very interesting. I hope more people can either help you or do their own part in other places. Unless you have anything else to say.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, cultists, and may your checks be always critical.